Throughout the years, Thorpe Park has changed more than most theme parks around the world. From an educational centre to a family-friendly place full of delight to a park swarmed with horror. 2024 marks the start of a new era for the island like no other, with the opening of the UK's tallest roller coaster and a brand new look. Before we get there, however, let's launch back in time and take an expedition to how Thorpe Park began, and perhaps, more importantly, changed. The good, bad, and everything between. Place your head back, face forward, 3, 2, 1.
Go, go, go! One day in the park.
In the early 70s, theme parks were popping up all over the United States. Amusement parks were no longer the hot ticket, it would be the theme park that would reign supreme in the leisure industry. Disneyland had ignited the imagination of what could be, and smaller, mini Disneyland regional style parks were being built to provide that immersive, entertaining day out for those close by them. This boom had not crossed the Atlantic to the United Kingdom. Ready Mix Concrete, or for short RMC, was founded in 1930. The company had grown following World War II to become the leading producer of concrete in the United Kingdom when they took over and absorbed another company, Wall & Ham, a building materials group. RMC would use large quarries throughout the country to extract gravel, and public concern had been rising about the industry's effect on these quarries, which, after the materials were extracted, essentially left the area useless. The company would have to start considering, and factoring in the cost, to start restoring these excavation areas. RMC had gained large tracts of land in their merger, mainly in southwest England, that were a series of exhausted sand and gravel pits, the majority of which had been wet workings, where natural water had filled these pits, leaving large lakes. With public concern growing, RMC was anxious to find ways of developing some of the sites to create areas for public enjoyment, thus demonstrating those exhausted pits could be turned into a positive situation and provide much needed public amenities. In 1969, a public assessment of the leisure industry in the UK had shown that with shorter working hours, leisure was a major growth area for the future. It also confirmed that the United Kingdom had lagged behind in terms of standards and sophistication compared to North America and Europe. Many attractions within the UK were run by showman families, most of which would be located at seaside resorts. Many of the popular holiday camps were outdated and were trying to rebrand, stately homeowners were struggling for funding, and they were turning to showman families to create tourist attractions such as Longley and Woburn, turning them into safari parks. Yet there were no capital-intensive leisure parks to be found of the level found in North America, such as Disney and Six Flags. Tim Hartwright, who joined RMC in the merger, had recently taken his family to one of the new safari parks, Longley, for a day out and suggested they build something similar, a safari and water parks on one of the expired quarries. RMC would create a subsidiary company called Leisure Sports Ltd for this new project. Due to the fact no consultants existed for this type of venture in the UK, they would plan a research trip to the United States to visit their theme parks. They came to the conclusion that the first park in the UK to go upmarket would be a great draw for the general public. The idea for a concrete company to use one of its quarries to turn it into the first major theme park in the UK was set. The next step would be for Leisure Sports to find a suitable location for their idea. They knew that location for the project was key. They came up with 6 requirements for this site. 1. The site must be near to centres of population. 2. It must be close to a motorway network, as journey times determine the area from where people would come. 3. Local roads must be capable of handling high volumes of traffic. 4. The park's surroundings should enhance the development, an escape from the concrete jungle. 5. If possible, it should be within an established tourist area where it is more likely that the local planning authority will understand and approve the idea. And 6. Public transport to the site will be a bonus though was not essential. The most important of these was that the site chosen had to take into consideration if planning permission would be granted. Wishful thinking was dangerous and costly, and many times before, would-be developers have been carried away by their own enthusiasm, only to find frustration and rejection from the local planning authority. The team behind designing this new project would be careful to try and avoid this trap. Or so they thought. The site chosen from the parcels of land the company would own would be 21 miles southwest of London, which would be considered the tourist area, between Staines and Chertsey, next to the village of Thorpe. It adjoined the M3 and the upcoming M25 motorways. Local roads could be configured to avoid going through the village, and a brand new roundabout would be built at Leisure Sport's expense to help traffic even further. The site's surroundings were heavily wooded, with the slopes of St Anne's Hill the perfect backdrop, and finally, there was a bus connection from Staines Station around 4 miles away. Well, I guess 5 out of 6 isn't bad. You suck, 950 Thorpe Park Express. The site had tons of potential for what would come in the future, with 250 acres of interconnected lakes, which would be used as the main highlight of the new attraction. The perfect setting for any leisure development. While the land area could be deemed quite small, even from the original planning, it was seen this could be overcome by filling in certain areas of the lake in the future to provide more space, and they knew that they would have to continue investment to be successful, as success was made from returning visitors. In the late 60s, this area was an active gravel pit, covered by a number of planning permissions that had covered a time span of 30 years, dating back to the opening of the pit in 1940, that required the site to be refilled and returned for agricultural use. In the early stages of planning, the idea was well received by the county planning officers. Local meetings were set up for an open day to show off the proposal, heavily emphasizing that if the park was to be developed, locals would be spared the disturbance of tipping operations over a further 20 to 25 years, and then it most likely would have just been turned into a housing development, and they wanted to do something more exciting and wouldn't destroy the character of Thorpe Village. The initial outline permission for the project to even begin would take over 2 years to negotiate and please the committees. Then in 1974, when everything looked like it was all set to happen, with a reorganization of government, the real planning troubles began. The plan to make a fully fledged theme park with attractions was the issue. A proposed ice rink, amphitheater, children's rides, and most importantly, a water flume ride were rejected. The whole plan of what would be coming would have to be redesigned to try and get something approved. It would take a further 6 years before Leisure Sport felt that their ideas had enough permissions for a sufficient attraction to make it viable. As fighting back and forth over what could and couldn't be at the attraction was finally at a point that it could actually become a reality, though its viability was still open to question.
And welcome to the World Water Skiing Championships outside of London, England in Thorpe Park.
In 1971, before the planning issues came to light, Leisure Sport had agreed to sponsor and hold the World Ski Championships at an upcoming attraction. This was planned to be the grand opening of the park in 1975 and end the opening season with a huge sporting event. The event had been confirmed and was held at the site without any public facilities or a theme park in place. During the event, they set up demonstrations, boat shows, and a fun fair, and it actually turned out to be a huge success. The Minister of Sport who attended was concerned about the planning difficulties they had faced and invited the planning committee to the final day, holding a reception for them to stress the importance of the theme park and the role it would play. The response was that the park would be served an Article 4 direction and require every aspect built to require permission by the local council. Leisure Sport would continue to insist that the project would work and continue to fight, and they would file hundreds of separate planning applications for everything they wanted to bring to the new attraction. To get this done as soon as possible, they would plan a park without any rides at all. Originally planned as Thorpe Water Park, they would call the new attraction Thorpe Park. For the theme of the new attraction, Leisure Sport would decide they would aim to blend together Britain's fascinating past with the latest in entertainment to stimulate the imagination and provide a day of pure fun. Thorpe Park will be based around the history, origins, and achievements of the British people as a maritime nation. Leisure Sport said they wanted something that would be British through and through, not a carbon copy of an American theme park. Since they were unable to build any rides, currently, they would focus on making a park with educational content that would attract school parties, yet still appeal to your average visitor.
Thorpe Park, just off junction 11 or 13 on the M25.
Visitors would cross a bridge between Fleet and Abbey Lake and enter the main hub of the park, the dome-shaped Royal Pavilion. Originally planned to be a tent due to fire safety regulation changes, it was later designed as a permanent structure made from concrete. The internal decor would feature Victorian and Edwardian shop fronts. On the ground floor would be the restaurant Oasis. Upstairs would be licensed bars called the Crown and Anchor Pub and the Oliver Twist quick food restaurant, along with an ice cream parlor called Sunday Best. Food in the park will be provided by Leisure Sport staff in-house, as they intended for it to maintain a high-quality standard. Also inside the dome structure will be a stage styled from the period of the famous Crystal Palace in London and planned to be used for evening entertainment. The lower levels will contain offices and back-of-house support for the park. From the Royal Pavilion, guests could jump on land trains, i.e. trams, or water buses, to take them to their place of interest within the park. The water buses carried visitors across nearly 200 acres of lakes, with a guided tour lasting 30 to 35 minutes and costing 40 pence per person. The tour would give the layout of the park, and while you could walk, the attraction was huge. The boat would later be included when the park went to a one price for everything entry model a few years later. To highlight the maritime theme, displays would recreate Britain's historical origins. The Invaders of Britain section, adjacent to Fleet Lake in an area close to the current Shark hotels, allowed visitors to see the succession from the Celts to the Normans, complete with a Stone Age cave and reconstruction of the White Horse on the Hill. Imperial Rome would be displayed with a Roman port, with a full-size replica of a Roman fighting galley called the Britannica. This area ended with King John's Pavilion, which had been reconstructed to mark the end of the initial period of racial integration and the evolution of British democracy. Today, that area is closed off for guest use. Children could play with remote-controlled boats on the water while looking at replica ships docked around the area. Visitors could stop at Abbey Manor, a historic Georgian house, at the Queen Anne Tea House for a snack, before heading away from the displays of ancient British history and move into Britain's contribution to the conquest of the air in an exhibit that commemorates the naval air tradition. A French airfield from 1914 was reconstructed, and full-size replicas of aircrafts would be on display, along with aircraft from the post-war Schneider Trophy races, German fighter planes, and many more. Visitors were welcome to sit inside and take photos with the exhibits. There were no "please do not touch" signs here. Throughout the park will be sanctuary spaces, a variety of landscapes and secluded places in which to picnic or relax in the beautiful grounds. Man's achievements will be featured in the Model World section, where 1/36 scale models could be found. The original concept of a water park would be complete with a 1,500 meter rowing course and water ski arena. They would hold the World Water Ski Championships again, this time having an actual park for the visitors. The area for water sports is no longer within the park's boundary, but continues to this day to be used for water activities on St. Anne's Lake. The opening year also promoted what would hopefully be coming soon, a children's farm and Treasure Island. After piers and amusement parks came the era of the stately safari, and now it was about to be the era of the theme park. Costing £3 million to build, after many troubled years fighting for planning permission, the UK was about to have its first theme park, at least according to them, if you don't count Gulliver's, which opened a year before. But I guess nobody really cares about that one. Thorpe Park would open to the public on May 24, 1979 by Admiral of the Fleet, the Earl Mountbatten of Burma. Shortly after, he would be assassinated, and the dome would be renamed in honor of him, opening the park. Open every day except Christmas Day, costing £1.50 per adult, with some special extras within the park costing extra. Thorpe Park was finally open, nearly a decade after it was first planned. Thorpe Park was called an experience for the whole family to enjoy, one of the only places in the UK with high quality educational entertainment at a low cost. According to them, a place designed for the British people to enjoy. Thorpe Park was a success, despite all the issues trying to make it happen. Educational school visits would keep the park busy during the normally slow midweek periods, and kids would be excited to return with their whole families. Bank holidays were full, and the park had complete control over every aspect of the business, allowing it to keep standards high and maintain reasonable prices. They would employ around 100 permanent staff with a mostly student-based seasonal staff count of 300. The staff were told to look smart, and cleanliness and staff behaviour was of utmost importance. If the park was kept tidy, people visiting would be less likely to litter, and they were very proud that they did not feature any graffiti. There was no "Sam was here" on any queues. 300,000 people visited Thorpe Park in the opening year. The reception to the park was mostly positive. Leisure Sport, however, had much bigger goals, and they wanted to increase attendance to 1 million visitors. They knew that return visits were key, and constant change was needed, continued updates, and importantly, they knew that a successful park could not exist alone, with just educational and passive forms of exhibits. Thorpe Park needed to contain elements of light-hearted fun. The company would take what they had learned in the first year and go into operation for the second season with the future in mind. The company knew they wanted to grow, and they would need to add the originally planned rides. During 1980, the park remained mostly the same, with a few small additions such as mini golf and a few small fairground rides for children. Attendance rose 50% to 450,000 visitors. During 1981, additions included a skating rink, which was in the first concept and finally was able to be added and approved, go-karts, along with the major headliner for the year, the UK's first 180 cinema. This would be a new visual experience from the USA, a 12-minute film with scenes such as a fast car, fighter jets, and riding the meanest roller coasters in the USA, all projected onto a 180-degree curved screen. It was approved as it was deemed an educational attraction. This educational yet entertaining plan continued when in 1982, the Thorpe Farm was the new attraction for the year, which again, they had to struggle to open. To try and get past the difficulties of planning permissions, many of the early attractions that would follow would be inside buildings, with appropriate themed facades to keep it in tone with the original concept of the park and convince the council that they were not changing away from that concept. Each year more attractions were added, and each year attendance increased. Yet every year, planning permission for every single attraction would be a fight. During the 1980s, ready-mix concrete had successfully turned a quarry into a top tourist attraction, and finally started to make a profit during the middle of the decade. Not all was perfect. They had to change a sign that said "No dogs" to "No dogs or pets" when a man tried to bring a snake to the park. As for the troubles with getting permission for attractions, they would continue to fight each step of the way for planning and turn Thorpe Park into more than just an educational water sports park. By 1984, the park had reached 1 million visitors during the season. This success had not gone unseen. By the mid-1980s, competition was starting to pick up.
Chessington Zoo. Chessington, Chessington, Chessington Zoo, Chessington Zoo, Chessington Zoo.
Around 10 miles down the road, Chessington Zoo was about to be transformed by the Two Swords Group. With the help of John Wardley, Chessington would be transformed into a fully themed £10 million attraction just down the road. Thorpe Park would look slightly dated in comparison, and for Thorpe Park, it meant they had to step up their game. After a cup of tea, Thorpe Park came up with its biggest plan, an investment so far. Just in time for the opening of Chessington World of Adventures. They would spend £2.2 million to compete, opening Thunder River. Thorpe Park had been using a kinda build it and then ask for permission attitude to some permits for smaller additions, and with more and more change away from the original concept for the park, the council and local residents were not happy. Concerns for the new attraction included many about the noise that would come with it. Not everyone was against the attraction. Some saw the benefits the park had brought to the local area, despite the change from what had been originally envisioned. After another battle, planning would be approved, as long as the ride used no loud music and kept screaming to a minimum. Thunder River would open as part of a new land, European Square. Thunder River's opening was attended by Dennis Thatcher, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's husband. He called Thorpe Park one of the finest examples of environmental repair in Europe. When asked if Margaret Thatcher would like the ride, he said he didn't know, don't know if she was into that kind of stuff. Thunder River's addition would not be without problems, but the park would power through and carry on with its planned £10 million expansion that was kick-start by the competition of Chessington. Slowly, but surely, the original exhibits were removed to make space for more exciting attractions. Thorpe Park would have to carefully consider planning permission and what could be added, basically, forever. The park was no longer just an educational attraction, and in less than a decade was a completely different place to what had originally opened, yet one that they had always wanted it to be. Some remnants from the original decade can still be seen. The dome remains today, a vital part of the park, and has had multiple names over the years. Model World remained until around 2005, when Stealth would take over much of its space. The classic teacups still twirl in the park today. Space Station Zero, the park's first roller coaster, is still there. Now outside is the Flying Fish, and you can still ride the waves on Thunder River. I didn't go into too much detail here about specific attractions, those will get future expeditions for themselves. For the park's 10th anniversary, Thorpe Park would introduce their biggest attraction ever. 1989 was planned to make another splash, introducing Logger's Leap, a ride that would open the way to a new era for the park and leave a lasting impression on one young kid. Many of the clips shown in this video were filmed in the decade that followed.
Here we go then, hold on tight.
In the following decade, a young Sam was about to fall in love with theme parks for the very first time, and it would be a group of rangers that would get him there. Little did I know, as my dad was filming me and my siblings running around Thorpe Park on my first visit, that it would become a place that I would visit many, many times in my life growing up. A place that would make me fall in love with theme parks, opening the door for my family to take us to every theme park they could each year, paving the way one day, many, many years later, to me making a video talking about that little park in England that turned one boy from Wiltshire into a theme park fan. The 90s at Thorpe Park would be something special. It was now a park that had changed from a small, water-based educational attraction into something so much more. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Expedition Thorpe Park. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe to join the expedition, follow us on social media for updates on upcoming expeditions, and a special thank you to our Patreons for supporting the channel. We will see you next time. Part 2 will be coming very shortly, as we lead up to the opening of Hyperia.